Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. Tom Dutta, like Butta. I'm pretty excited because we have an epic guest in the green room, and I'm teasing you on that. Before that, I'm gonna actually put something on the screen here and say thank you to everybody for their commitment to the show. You know, when I started the show, I didn't know where it was going to go, and we've been recognized in the last year and a half with some acknowledgments. Pretty humbled, but it's because of you and the quality of our guests. We are rated the number 2 CEO podcast in the United States by FeedSpot out of California. We're in the top 10 Canadian leadership podcasts by FeedSpot again. And I just found out by Million Podcasts, their rating agency, we're in the top 100 storytelling podcasts. And as you know, we go into Plato's Garden and tell stories. So pretty humbled by all that. The studio is booked out now 4 months every week, and we have a waiting list, and the guests just keep coming. And I started as a guy with a cheap mic on a TV tray in my living room. So that's how you're self-taught. So let me get that off the screen, everyone. What would it be like to get to know the guest from the inside out? What if the person you love most were about to step into a hospital and they didn't know what was about to happen to them? What if the doctor standing at the bedside was the one thing holding that whole system together, and that doctor was burning out too? Today on the Quiet Warrior Show, a man who has spent 5 decades inside that same system breaks his silence. His father drove a truck, and nobody in his extended family had finished college, but he was the first. And he almost quit medical school because of the weight of all of that, but he didn't. He persevered. He trained at Harvard. He trained at Penn. And he trained under a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Imagine that. And after 50 years, he stood at that bedside of patients whose hearts were failing them. So he trained hundreds of cardiologists who now practice around the world what he's taught them. He spent 13 years inside the FDA, and he was advising them on the drugs and devices that your doctor hands over to you. And he's not a bystander. He's one of the architects of that system that he's now calling broken. Then his mentor, the man who had taught him that medicine is an act of love, he died a terrible death, not from his illness, no, but from the same system itself. And he vowed he would speak. So 20 real patients, 20 real failures, one book that named the players nobody in the medical industry is willing to name out loud. Administrators, insurers, private equity, pharmacy middlemen, malpractice attorneys, and the blind spots inside his own profession. He's not here to sell you fear, everyone. He's here to hand you the map for every medical decision that's still ahead of you. In his own words, he's not going to stop until medicine is fixed or until he stops breathing. Let that land. So his name is Dr. Peter Kowey, and the book is called Failure to Treat. And in the next hour, you're going to understand why 2 out of 3 Americans have quietly stopped trusting the system that is supposed to save their lives. So stay with me till the end, will you? And now, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, Dr. Peter Kowey. Doctor, welcome to the show.
Tom, thank you so much for having me.
What was it like sitting there and hearing me introduce all about you?
It was a little bit on the embarrassing side, but you said a number of things that I think really resonate and are really important. And that is that we're kind of in a desperate situation to fix the system that we've put into place and to make it better for our patients.
Yeah, absolutely. I just hold up the book again. I know you've got one. We're going to have you read from it. There's so much in there, and I've read it cover to cover. But what we're going to do today is go into Plato's garden and have some fun with you, telling some stories. So you ready to go into Plato's garden?
Certainly.
All right. What would it be like to go into Plato's garden with Peter Kowey? Well, welcome, Peter, to Plato's garden. And Peter, you're a scholar, so I know you understand Plato. Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece, and founder of the Platonic school of thought in the academy, from the Greek word academia. And so you can see on the screen there a picture of him and Aristotle kind of walking and talking. And they would talk and have thoughts about their thoughts, something that I believe that we don't do very well. So today when we talk in Plato's, you won't know this, Peter, but I'm going to weave the narrative through three areas. And this will help the audience understand the influences that shaped you in your work. We call it context. So the first is macro, what was happening in the world around you that may have influenced your public work. A mezzo, which is what was happening in the industry or sector where you do your work. And the third is my favorite, what was happening in the personal life, the man himself, that's you. So let's get that off the screen. And so to start us going, I'm just going to throw something out here. So Peter, you begin your book by saying you came to medicine as a complete innocent. I want you to take us back there and walk us into the waiting room of that family doctor with the bow tie and the gentle dogs, because I think a lot of what follows is going to start right there.
It was a transformational experience for me to go to see our family doctor. As you said in the very beginning, I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I said I wanted to be a doctor. The reason I did it is because my parents, who took me to the doctor, had such enormous respect for this man that you have to. It's sort of like putting yourself in a bit of a time warp. This is a guy sitting in an office, no secretary, no nurse, no appointments. You just sort of went in and got seen in turn. And he did everything. He brought you into his office. He examined you. He gave you your shots. He gave you your pills if you needed them. He was incredibly reassuring, always dressed really wonderfully, in a nice suit, and his manner was amazing. And when we would leave the office, no matter what happened, Tom, my parents would always say the same thing, that they felt better, that they really felt like going to the doctor had made them feel better, even if we hadn't really received the treatments that we were supposed to get quite yet. It was really an amazing thing. He actually did house calls, Tom, and I remember him. He was like a god walking into our house. When he came into the house to see my mom, who was upstairs sick, it was amazing.
Yeah,
it was incredible.
I want to just riff on that. That's kind of funny because I'm drawing pictures with words and see everybody what happens is we're telling stories back and forth. But man, you took me back. So my father died in 18. I told you offline that it was a heart attack. So there's a thread here connected to cardio. But mom was always sick, and we had a doctor from Guyana, just somebody, Dr. Das, that my mom introduced to. But it was the same thing. Like I used to think that he was clergy. And like if he told my mom take 5 different pills, she'd be on the 5 pills. But just going to that room and everything you said is exactly what I experienced. So that took me back. So thanks for sharing that. I want to jump into micro here for a moment and throw this out. We can riff on it. So I said in the intro, your father drove a truck, and nobody in your extended family had finished college. So what did you tell yourself on the nights in medical school when you almost quit?
I remember specifically thinking to myself that my parents, who had sacrificed so much to get me where I had gone, that if I had gone home and told my father that I was getting out of medical school, I think he probably would have. I don't know what he would have done. It might have been a physical assault, Tom. He was very, very bright man, and he felt like his life had been somewhat compromised by the fact that he just simply didn't have the money, and neither did his parents. He had to go drive a truck for my grandfather, who had a fruit business. He used to go around huckstering fruit off the back of a truck. Yeah. And I remember distinctly thinking to myself, I can't do this because my parents will be disappointed. And so I'm going to try to stick it out. I think that was the primary reason.
Who do you think shaped you most, your mom or your dad or both?
It was clearly my mother, because my father was on the road. I mean, he was an over-the-road truck driver, so he was gone for days at a time. I spent a tremendous amount of time with my mom, and she was always extremely interested in my education and helping me with my schoolwork, et cetera.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Hey, what I like about live streaming is we get to experience your life. So there's a dog barking there. We don't care about that. We like that. You told me, what kind of a dog do you have?
That's a Portuguese water dog, and he's a watchdog, and he's watching people go past our house and making sure that we know that there's somebody out there.
So another funny about the book, it's called Failure to Treat. So if you don't give him treats, is that what he feels that, failure to treat? He's going to get mad at you because of that.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
All right, I'm going to put something on the screen here and play it. It's got a little sound clip. It's going to create some emotion for you, I know, hopefully positive. And then we'll talk about it for a minute, okay? So just let me add this. We'll tidy this up. Let me add this and tell me if you see it. Do you see that there?
Yep.
Okay, so let me go and I'm going to hit the play button, and hopefully the sound will come through. You hear the sound?
Yep.
Well, I'm pleased to address a group in India who's beginning a struggle for better health care and addressing some of the issues we commonly face. The ones we confront in the United States today is the progressive industrialization of medicine. That means commodification of everything about it and proletarianization of the health workers. That includes doctors, nurses, and everybody. And
so we're just going to pause it there. Let me come back here and take that off the screen. So before you comment on that, I'm going to throw this thought out to you. That was, I believe, Dr. Bernard Lown taught you, and he taught you from the research I did and what you said, that sitting down in a patient's presence was a sacred act. And when is the last time you felt like a patient treated that way? I want you to just talk about that video clip and anything you want to say about him, because I think he was pretty special to you, right?
He altered my life, certainly for the better. He was the most influential person in my professional life.
Wow.
It's really kind of hard, Tom, to put into words what he meant to the medical profession. This is a man who spent his entire career making sure that physicians remembered why they took the Hippocratic Oath and what it meant. The thing that you just said was just one example of the many ideas that he had. For example, he said, when you walk into a patient's room, he would ask the intern when we would go on rounds, and I was the fellow on the service. He said, what's the first thing you do when you walk into a patient's room? And they never got it right. They would say, well, walk up to the patient, examine them, blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, sit down. Because
Wow.
If you sit down, it gives a clear signal to the patient that you're not in a hurry. They're going to have a conversation. You're there to answer their questions. Sit down, cross your legs, and relax. And then ask them something about themselves, a personal question, something about their family or their profession or something non-medical, to establish that first relationship with the patient, to make them aware of the fact that you care about them. That's just one example of the many, many things that he taught us about how to take the right care of patients.
Well, that's pretty incredible. What you said about what he was doing, just through the lens of neuroscience, because I mentioned you offline about my concussion I had. You see in the background of the studio there's a human brain. I call him Mr. Brain or Mrs. Brain. I take him out when I do public speaking, but I know you know the science inside out. But what I was thinking when you said that is it made me think about, that's building rapport. It's building trust. things like oxytocin, right? Things are going in my head. Because I mean, when I walk into my doctor's office when I had my concussion, I was scared, you know what? And I was afraid. And so that's a great thing. He said something, some might say controversial or some might say profound in that video clip. Just comment about his message there. And I think there's such an alignment with what your work is.
Well, he is making the point that obviously, as we said earlier, this is a sacred profession, and there's so much responsibility that's given to caregivers. Another example of something that he said, and it was implied in that conversation, was when you're with a physician, and I'm sure you remember this, Tom, it's not every inflection of the doctor's voice, every manner, everything that they do in the room is important to the patient and conveys a message. And I'll give you an example, Tom. I was with a patient one time, and I was listening to her heart, and as I always did on every visit, and she had a very interesting little sound in her heart. It was like a click. It didn't really mean a whole lot, but it was a little interesting. So I spent a little extra time listening to her in a couple of other positions and with a different part of my stethoscope. She went crazy. She jumped up on the table and she said, "What's the problem? What's the matter?" And I said, "There's nothing the matter." She says, "But you're listening to my heart twice as long as you ever have before."
Wow.
Did you hear something? Is there some problem? That's the level of perception that patients have when they're dealing with their physicians, and physicians have been very ignorant of the importance of communication, as you said, establishing the rapport and reaching out. And Dr. Lown, that was another thing that he preached. Everything that you do in the patient's presence means something.
Oh, that's incredible. Another quick story to share back. You reminded me of when I had the concussion, I saw 12 specialists. They couldn't figure it out. And I saw the first psychiatrist. And would you know it, Peter? There's a wait list in Canada. Our system's broken for psychiatry. It's like 2 years. But I got into see this guy. My medical doctor, Margaret, said, "I don't really want to recommend you to him. I want you to recommend this guy." I said, "Margaret, I'm having these funny thoughts. So she sent me this guy. No kidding. I get into his office. He's got this big bay window, plants, nice office. He talks to me for 15 minutes. He's asked me a few questions. And then he hands me a prescription. He says, "Take these and I'll see you in 90 days. And it was antidepressants. And I looked at him and I said, I know a lot of people take these and I'm worried about side effects. I said, what happens in 90 days if I start having, he said, and he scolded me. He says, "You're not looking after your brain. If you don't start looking after it, it's going to shrink. I'll see you in 90 days.
Oh my God.
And I call a true story on this. I called Margaret back and I said, "Fire him. I'm never going to go back." I never did. I never took the pills. I found another doctor. So it's a lot about what Peter said, everybody, about rapport and building trust. Hey, Peter, I'm going to put something else on the screen. Tell us what we're looking at.
Oh, that's the cover of the book with the title and a quote from the American Journal of Medicine editor-in-chief about why the book is an important one to read.
Read that quote out.
"This book should be required reading for all clinicians and patients who are serious about transforming American healthcare." It's from Joe Alpert, who's a friend and editor of the American Journal of Medicine.
Very cool. So I'm going to just throw this out to riff on. There's a line in your prologue where you call this book the hardest thing you have ever written. What was the moment you knew you had to write it?
It actually was during a conversation I had with Dr. Lown, and when he was being not treated well at the end of his life, and we had this conversation, and he looked at me and he said, "You've had a stellar career, Peter. We're very proud of what you've done, but you have to give something back, and you have to give more back." And we talked about this, and I said, "Well, how about talking about the system that we're so disappointed?" And he said that would be an excellent idea, and I think that's where it germinated.
Interesting.
Yeah. The other thing that he did that I copied was he was a storyteller, and you mentioned this earlier in our conversation, Tom. But storytelling in medicine is an ancient art. We use stories all the time in teaching in medicine. And I thought that the most effective way to convey this, both to people in the lay people as well as the people in the profession, was to maybe tell some stories.
Yeah, why do you think stories stick and facts and figures don't always stick?
Well, I think it's the way you were talking about brain wiring. I think that's the way our brain is wired, that we tend to remember things that are cohesive, that are not just little bullet points. I was never really very good, by the way, at memorizing and what are the 10 things that you see in this particular disease. I would never did well with that stuff. But if you related it to something else that I was familiar with, as I did in the stories, it tended to stick.
Yeah, I think there's some clues there for my audience because of all these recognition awards I told you about up front. We use narrative story on the podcast, and it's true. People they get emotionally connected. It's kind of like Star Wars. Spielberg created that based on hero's journey narrative. It's all story. I was telling my wife I can wake up and remember the movie by Hitchcock, The Birds.
Oh yeah.
I can remember that like yesterday. Yet we watched a movie 2 days ago and I can't remember it. It's because Hitchcock did put us in that journey. Hey, want to do something fun and read something out of the book?
Sure, that'd be great.
While you get that ready, I'm just going to tell the audience what we're going to do. So when Peter's ready, he's going to tell me. I'll cue it up, and then I'll full screen Peter, so we can repurpose this. So Peter, you can use this. So tell me when you're ready.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, and so why don't we just do this? I'm just going to. Hold up the book there so people can see, so you can frame it in case while you're reading you want to show the cover. Okay, good. All right, so 3, 2, 1, stand by. What it would be like to hear the author of Failure to Treat, Peter Kowey, MD, read from his book. So Peter, we're going to have you read something out of the book. So why don't you tell us what you're going to read, and then I'll let you go for it.
Well, I was going to read a little bit from the end of the preamble of the book.
Okay, so just everybody, Dr. Peter Kowey reading from his book.
Ready to go?
Ready to go.
The last paragraph in the preamble says, I truly hope this book helps all of us to refocus on what makes medicine so wonderful and diminishes the distraction of profit and power that have led to the sad stories told herein. I welcome dialogue with healthcare professionals, patients, payers, administrators, and lay readers, because only through the process of self-examination and external critique will we improve a broken healthcare system to which people needing care and trust their very lives. To that end, I invite interested people to access my website, peterkoweyauthor.com. There you can share your views and stay current as I regularly update and create video. The most important element is to address the new developments in the struggle for better medical care for all.
A little free, cheap applause for Peter Kowey's reading. That was awesome, and you look great on camera reading that. It's a very real treat. As you know, I'm a published author, and one of the biggest joys I find is when you walk into a library and you see an author sitting there, especially reading children's books to children. Right? It's pretty amazing. I just put another camera on the screen here, Peter. Change it up a bit. Yeah, that's my studio cam. You can see I've got some stuff there with the book. I had some fun and I always like to do this so you can butcher it if I'm wrong. I wrote down here about the structure. I wrote the thesis, what I thought the book was about, but you'll tell us that. But the structure, because I think it's important, each of the 20 vignettes follows the same structure. There's a patient introduced, something goes wrong, a clinical explanation follows, commentary exposes the systemic failure behind the bad outcome, a conclusion widens that lens, and practical patient advice closes each chapter. And that architecture seems to mirror Grand Rounds. It's built to be accessible to not just doctors, but non-clinicians. So did I get that?
It's something you said right there towards the end is really important to me, because in the old days, it's not done as much as we used to. In the old days, when we went to Grand Rounds, which was like the major conference of the week in a medical center where, medical students and residents and attending physicians, they would always start with a patient and a patient story. In fact, a lot of times they would bring the patient in to the auditorium and talk to the patient in front of the audience. But there was an introduction that included a clinical story. And then from there, the speaker would take that and go and run with it and talk about the disease state or whatever it was that was important. I think that is the way that, and we've said this, I think that's the way that doctors learn. And I think that's the way that doctors retain information. And I think it's also true for patients, which is why that I decided to use that genre.
No, it's very good. I'm going to do a shout out here for the book. Everyone get the book, read it. But I got to ask you to post a review on Amazon, Goodreads.com, because as Peter knows, author's work's not known until somebody posts about it, so people can see the buzz around it. And when you do write a review, say something about the structure, something you liked about it, because that really is right, Peter. That's what gets people interested. Now, I never do this on the show up front. I usually add it to the show notes, but I want the audience to know a little bit about the depth of who you are. And you're very humble. I get this. Like everyone, I asked Peter if he wanted Dr. MD on his title on the screen. He says, no, just Peter. So you are a humble guy. In fact, you're here and you're so humble. You feel like the truck driver across from you, right? Two truckers bouncing around in your chairs. So Peter holds the William Wyckoff Smith Chair in Cardiovascular Research at Lankow Institute of Medical Research, professor of medicine and clinical pharmacology at Thomas Jefferson University, emeritus chief of division of cardiovascular diseases at Lankow Heart Institute. But this is a part that really is important. Over his career, he's authored and co-authored over 450 peer-reviewed papers, significant, co-edited 5 textbooks on arrhythmia, received more than 150 research grants, and trained hundreds of cardiologists, et cetera, served on 9 years on the FDA, and it goes on and on and on. I think this is why your work's so important, because it's credible, especially talking to a scholar who's just done some work myself. So congratulations on all of that. So let's get back into Plato's Garden. Peter, we're going to go into mezzo, which is the sector. That's probably a deeper dive on your work. So Mrs. Francis, walk us through her Saturday night in the hospital. What does that one story tell us about what the electronic medical record has actually done to patient care?
Yeah, again, all these stories are real. They've been anonymized and obviously de-identified so that nobody gets embarrassed. But this is a very, very sad case in which a patient went to the hospital with chest pain. This is a woman who had a known aneurysm in her chest, a weakness in the aorta in her chest. When she went to the hospital, she was having chest pain, and she told the nurse, triage nurse, that she had an aneurysm so that they would know that she did. One of the failings here was that she did have medical records, but they were in a different hospital and they did not have interoperability, so they couldn't access the records from the other hospital. So the nurse writes down, patient has an abdominal aneurysm. It was the wrong location. She said, you can have aneurysms in your abdomen, in the abdominal part of your aorta, or in your chest. She wrote down the wrong thing. That note was cut and pasted all the way through this woman's chart, so that everybody who saw her when she was admitted to the hospital thought that she had an abdominal aneurysm, but she was having chest pain. And so they were concerned about her having a heart attack, when in reality it was her aorta that was dissecting. And so she never had the correct studies. They ended up discharging her without really understanding what was going on. And she died the next day when the aneurysm fully dissected and ruptured. It was an example of failing of the electronic medical record and not allowing and not making people continue to interrogate and ask things and depending on what's written down in an electronic record. It was a major disaster, obviously.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was reading that part of the book, I was just shaking my head. I think about also how busy the doctors must be. And, I have a lot of friends who have been in your profession who don't get a lot of sleep, and, the world's crazy. And then you have to, I mean, it's almost like I spent some time in my exec career in the sales force where you use CRM systems and you have to document all your notes, and you never do it right. And you always say, okay, I'll park my car on the side of the road or do it tonight before bed. Tell me, how do you, in a routine as a doctor like you, how do you populate that? Do they have voice recognition now? Do you think it works well?
Well, there's several different ways that people do it. One is with voice recognition. Another is using templates. When I was really busy in clinical practice, I continued to dictate my notes because I really felt that I wanted to personalize all of them. That's something else that Dr. Lown taught me to do. But one of the things that's happening, Tom, that's really frightening is that, yes, doctors are under a tremendous amount of pressure to see many, many patients, and they just simply don't have all the time they need for documentation. Unfortunately, a lot of people are now beginning to use AI. Now, there's nothing wrong with using AI as long as it's carefully supervised and edited. But what we're seeing now are a number of mistakes in the chart because people are using AI without editing. And I think it really there's a potential here for even more harm from the electronic record.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm self-taught with AI. I use 3 different LLMs, and I took a course to learn how to prompt. I didn't realize that when you use AI, most people don't, that it's like working with an employee saying, I'd like you, Peter, to do this task. You have to prompt it, but it speaks a language differently. So I can't even imagine in your profession how you would create prompts and instructions to make sure that doesn't happen. But looking ahead 10 years, maybe that'll be improved. Let's get back in here to Plato's. Another story. So a mother and father race towards a hospital and the emergency room door is locked. In your book, that is Baby Epps. Private equity had bought the hospital. How did American medicine become a place where the ER just closes?
Isn't it amazing, Tom? I mean, it boggles the mind. So, as you know, there's an increasingly large number of hospitals, most of them smaller hospitals, that are closing. And they're closing or limiting their services because they're not generating sufficient revenue. This is happening in rural areas where there's a lot of elderly people who don't have very good insurance, but it's also happening in the inner city where there's many Medicaid patients and patients who don't have any insurance whatsoever who are frequenting the hospitals, and those people are not turned away. They're treated, they're admitted, but the hospital has to eat the bill. And the other thing that's happening is that medical insurance companies are continually ratcheting back on the amount of money that they pay for patient care in the hospital. So and then the cost of care itself is exploded. Yeah. The cost of drugs, the cost of operating, the cost of equipment. You take all this together, it's a formula for disaster. So I don't know if you've seen this or not, but almost 50% of hospitals in the United States right now are operating in the red.
No, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. They're trying to make up the difference with philanthropy or what they have in their holdings, but the truth is that day-to-day operations they're operating at a loss, and we're fearful that with further cuts in what Medicaid is going to pay and Medicare that we're going to see even more of this. So what happened in that story was that an affluent couple moves to a rural area, has a baby that needs medical care. They had already anticipated this and said, well, the hospital's only a 5-minute ride away. We're in good shape. But when they went to that hospital, when that baby was sick, the ER had been closed, and it necessitated a much longer process of obtaining care, and the baby didn't make it.
Wow.
And unfortunately, that's becoming a much more frequent story in our country.
Yeah, my goodness. I have a lot of guests from across the border. We're in Canada, Western here, Vancouver, but I also work both sides of the border, and I get the system. I'm not sure if you have a view of Canada. You can comment after, but I just throw this out to riff with you. When I had my concussion, a couple of years after, I was coming out of a parking lot and somebody rear-ended me. It wasn't a big deal, but it felt like a wave of energy through my brain. My brain literally shook. And that's what they say. Once you've had your first one, sometimes you can be sitting on a tour bus on a bumpy road. And I walked into literally 4 blocks from my home into Eagle Ridge Hospital here, 4 hours sitting in ER. Nobody saw me. So I literally left. And my vestibular was out. So I went back to the neuroplasticity clinic where they helped me the first time, and they saw me right away. When I was there, Peter, the place was full, and there was an elderly gentleman on a gurney out in the lobby, okay? And there was 2 nurses and this guy who looked like a male nurse. They were arguing behind the door. This is a conversation almost verbatim. He says, "What's that guy doing out there? He's been there more than 45 minutes." She says, "Well, blah, blah, blah." He says, "Well, you know the new rules. We can't leave them out there more than 45 minutes." You know what she says? She says, "Well, he's going to die anyway." Oh. And talk about rapport. I'm sitting in the ER waiting to get help, right? I'm going like, what the fuck? Pardon my language. I'll have to edit that. But what do you do? What are we doing? And now I live in a middle upper class neighborhood, but this goes on across Canada, and we have our care cards and things, but our system is so broken. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'm not going to get into geopolitical commentary, but it is true. Canada is a nation that's multicultural. We opened our immigration policy wide, and we had millions of people come into the country. So you see a lot of people in the ER that are that are immigrants that don't necessarily have the right service and support. And then we have a problem on our streets as well, like in the U.S. some places with overdoses and addiction and homeless. So you see, as you're sitting in this ER, you see 5, 6 people. One guy looks like he's from a gang. One guy's bleeding somewhere, and somebody staggers in. They look like they haven't showered for a month, but they're homeless. This is what our system has become. Just comment.
Well, yeah, the ER has become a dumping ground. I mean, it's happening in the United States because people who have problems that should be dealt with are not getting those problems addressed because of the lack of facilities, the lack of primary care doctors, the lack of operating clinics in areas where people really do have problems. And so they sit around, they get really sick with things that could have been prevented or treated at an earlier stage, and they end up in the emergency room. And you're right. It's a motley crew of people in the emergency room. And now picture on the other side, the emergency room physician who's scrambling to try to see everybody and get everything done and document everything. And by the way, being afraid in the United States of getting sued because ER doctors get sued like crazy in this country.
Yeah.
So they're going to order a whole bunch of tests, make sure that they're covering their butt. It's just like it's almost like a witch's brew for making up the worst situation that you could possibly imagine. And that's what I tell rich people, by the way. Rich people think that they're going to get off well. I don't need to worry about this medical care crisis. You go to the emergency room, you get in line, baby. I mean, you're going to sit there.
Exactly.
You're going to sit there like everybody else if you get sick and you go to the ER. If you think that you're going to get better care because you have a lot of money, you're crazy. And so it's all of us are in this boat, Tom. It's not just the poor people. It's everybody in our country who really needs the help.
I really appreciate your perspective, and I don't disagree with anything you said. I just want to do critical thinking and connect dots. So everybody, we're meshing it all together so you can get a deeper understanding of Peter and his work. But Peter, I just completed a doctorate degree at Middlesex University in London. I don't say that for any applause, but the university midway through went through a major restructuring. And the business and law faculty where I did my doctorate, they cut half their staff. And you could feel the stress. Now, what's interesting is in Canada, there's been big press releases. 2 of our universities laid off 12,000, 20,000 staff. Another article the CEO published about the budget deficit of 25 million. Now, we're a country of 40 million and you're 350. So you can do scale there. My point is that I come from banking and insurance and finance, and I've been through 11 mergers, transactions. So I'm a turnaround CEO by trade. everywhere you go, every sector, every industry at some point hits the wall and they have to blow it up and recreate it. And in the university I was getting my doctorate, they brought in new leadership, and they're going through pain, but they're trying to fix it. So would it be fair to say that what your book says so well is what the roots and issues are, that it has to be rebuilt or reconstructed in some way?
I couldn't agree more, Tom. We spent in 2022, we spent $5 trillion on healthcare in the United States. $5 trillion, more than the GDP of most countries in the world.
That's huge.
Right? I mean, it's an amazing amount of money we're spending on healthcare, and we're getting nothing for it. I mean, people, no matter who you talk to in this country, nobody's happy. Patients aren't happy. Doctors aren't happy. Nurses certainly aren't happy. They're underpaid and abused and overworked. How could we be spending that much money and not have it go in the right direction? It clearly is because there are a number of people who are taking advantage of the system, making lots and lots of money, and that's not directly contributing to patient care. And so, we need a gross overhaul of the system. It's not going to be a Band-Aid. It's not going to fix it.
Yeah, just reading off my paper here, I had a few signature sentences from your work, and one of them is follow the money. That's Peter's shorthand for how to locate the perpetrator behind any bad medical outcome. And it makes a lot of sense. But I don't know a lot about your structures, but I know about administrators. And reading your book, everybody, that's why you got to get this book. Hey, Peter, hold the book up again. Might as well give it another plug.
Absolutely.
We'll do it in stereo. Read the title.
Failure to treat: how a broken healthcare system puts patients and practitioners at risk.
All right. Look at that, everybody. I'm so grateful that Peter sent it to me and signed it for me. It'll go, by the way, Peter, on my book stack. Every guest who's come through, I read the books. It'll be permanently there. And so it'll give you free recognition as long as I'm here. But I mean, this is the thing about wasted money. So I think the book's a great read. Everybody should get it. But that's a really big point. Where's the money going? Let's keep going. Are you having fun?
Oh, this is terrific. I always like talking about my book.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite things, Tom.
Oh yeah, and I read somewhere that you wrote before this. This was your first nonfiction. You wrote 5 novels. Is that right?
Yes, and they were all medical murder mysteries, and became very popular. And I was getting ready. In fact, I'm working on this next one, but I was encouraged by a lot of people to turn my attention to something like this.
That's great. Well, good for you. If you want any early praise or anything, or to help with your next books, getting it out there, just let me know. Let's go into the last segment of the Plato's here, which I call macro. So this is the global influences of context. Okay, Peter? As an example, you might have grown up where your parents were in the Depression, and or you grew up in the World War era, and that maybe influenced the context of how you think and work. So trillions of dollars spent every year. So we're just talking about money. And the United States sits at the bottom of developed world health outcomes. So where do you think the money's going?
Well, it's definitely going to big pharma. And that's not a big surprise. I mean, the cost of pharmaceuticals in the United States is a disgrace. I mean, we pay upwards of an order of magnitude more for drugs in this country than in other parts of the world for the same medications.
Yeah.
So we're getting ripped off on the pharmaceutical side. It's also going into the hands of into the pockets of private equity as they continue to purchase healthcare organizations and systems and hospitals. There was one here in Philadelphia, Tom, called Crozer-Chester, which is a 3-hospital health system that covered a very large geographic area south of Philadelphia, that was bought out by a health equity company and then bankrupted with the intention of using the assets and putting the money into the pocket of the people who had bought them in the first place. The first thing they did, Tom, after they bought that hospital system, is that they took out hundreds of $millions of loans and then proceeded to waste all of that money so that they went bankrupt.
Goodness.
So it closed, the hospital system closed, and those people in that area now have no access to acute care whatsoever. So that's another place it's going. It's going into the pockets of malpractice attorneys who in this country are making enormous amounts of money on gigantic verdicts, going after physicians in many situations who have not really done anything wrong. And then, of course, there's the medical insurance companies who are cashing in big time on profits that they make from insuring patients and then limiting access to care. You know, that this whole thing about prior authorization, it's a really big problem in this country, where if a doctor orders something, there's at least a 15 to 20% probability that the patient will never get what the doctor ordered because the insurance company won't pay for it. So there's lots of places where we're leaking money. We're wasting money in the Medicare system. There's a tremendous amount of fraud and abuse in the Medicare system. People are spending hundreds of billions of dollars on worthless medicines. Do you ever watch television and the things that they talk about on television as being useful for a variety of indications, when in reality there's no evidence at all that they work? So we're leaking money in many different places, and as I said, it's going to take some heavy duty work in order to make it get better.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have a lot of TV shows and things about the medical. There are these series, right? And you watch, and they depict stories of working in the ER, and a lot of American ones. And you see these hospitals getting sued, these doctors, you know, getting accused of this and that. And you know, at one point, it makes me think about somehow there has to be a reckoning where the system starts to crumble. What do you think the one thing that has to happen before people start taking this seriously, or is that starting to happen?
Oh, I think it's happened. One of the things about this book, Tom, is that there's not a single person I've talked to who's read this book who didn't want to tell me their story. You know,
really?
They didn't have the relative themselves, something that happened that was catastrophic and upset them. They want to tell their story. Nobody's happy with it. And I think we've gotten past that point. What we need is some kind of an organized effort, and it's probably going to be at a federal level in this country to change fundamentally the way that people pay for their health care. And so we don't have this fee-for-service system that breeds a lot of corruption. We need something that is much more equitable, and we need to pay more attention to people who have common diseases and not worry. You know, we watch these TV commercials about myasthenia gravis and ATTR cardiomyopathy and all these other weird diseases that, they're important, but people are dying from common diseases in many parts of our country. There's lots of things that we need to do to make that situation better.
Yeah, I'm an ultimate optimist. I mean, coming through a recovery from an injury of my brain and the help I got, I mean, despite the warts in the system, there's a lot of good there. But we honor you because it takes people like you to come out. I call you a trailblazer. Man, you just like putting it all out there, but we need more of you in the world to do that. Let me just throw this out to you. I believe, these are my words, your book is deliberately apolitical, and yet you write that both parties have failed. What does a real fix look like if nobody is running for anything? And this maybe builds on what we just talked about. When you were talking about the need at federal, I just keep thinking about, and it's no different than in Canada in our parliament, your lawmakers, people have to go to work and actually do something. Yes. And I think sometimes there's so much dysfunction, and then you have these terms for your president, where a lot of progress is made, then all of a sudden, you know, the midterms and there's a change or something. It's just crazy. I just wonder what you think about how do you get that level to, and maybe they all have to start having heart attacks and experience the system. I don't know.
Well, I think that our voting public needs to get focused on this issue and ask people who are running for political office, who've already been in Congress, for example, what have you done to make the situation better? And the answer is going to be, unfortunately, the incumbents have done nothing. And if they've done nothing, then in essence, what they're telling the public is, we don't care if you have diseases then that you die. We don't care. It's not our priority. It's just the way it is. And by the way, Congress people have the best health insurance on the planet Earth. And they have it for the rest of their lives. Even when they're out of office, they and their families get the best care in the world. They're basically turning their back on everybody else. And I think that if that's what you've done, then you need to go. You need to be voted out, and somebody needs to be put in your place who actually is paying attention to this issue. Tom, there's nothing more important than your health. I mean, and you know this, when you're sick, there's nothing else that matters. Nothing else in your life takes any priority whatsoever, because you got to get better. And if we're going to let people suffer with their diseases and not get better, then you're basically turning your back on them. You're not representing them anymore. You need to go. And I think that's what we're hoping happens in our political process, but it hasn't happened yet, unfortunately.
No, I mean, amen to that. There's one thing we have on our, the difference where they say the difference between wisdom and knowledge is time. And the one thing we know is certain is some of the leaders in Congress or in our governments are older people, and they're going to be gone. I mean, my daughter's 28. She just got married, got her degree. And, she's the future leader of the countries. And so there's all these people coming up. I just hope that people will go into the political arena and take some of those great jobs and be inspired to do it, not fearful of how they're going to be denigrated. And, it's a horrible space to work sometimes. Let's get back into Plato's here. Great discussion. If a young woman came to you today, or man, and said he wants to be a doctor, what would you tell her or him that you would never have said 10 years ago?
Well, 10 years ago, I would have categorically said, yes, you need to do that. If a person is a bright person and properly motivated, then I think medicine is just an amazing profession. As I said a few minutes ago, when you're sick, your whole life is corrupted. The ability to take that off of somebody's shoulders and restore their normal life, their normal quality of life, I mean, that's transformational. That's a miracle. And the ability to do that and to do it thousands of times during a career I can't think of anything better. However, today, I would have to sit with that person and make sure that they understood what the limitations are of the system that they're going to work in. I don't want people to go into medicine with all their aspirations and then be bitterly disappointed when they're finished the process of what they're stuck with at the end. They need to know what they're going into. And they also have to have some idea of how they might themselves bring about change and what are the things that they can do to make the system better. And so it would be a longer conversation than it would have been 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's very inspiring, Peter. I worry a lot about the care, the front line. You mentioned about nurses, but also mental health. And so what these people, what they see and what they do and how we can look after them, right? Because they can't be effective. Interesting. All right, we're going to do something here to honor you, and then we've got a couple quick things before we wrap up. So let me put something else on the screen here. Okay, Peter, I'm putting something on the screen here. Tell me what you see. Looks like
great. Customer review. Yeah.
All right. So the only thing I don't like about showing Amazon is it shows my shopping habits. But obviously, if there's nothing, there's not. Hey, you'll like that. There's a bottle of omega-3 fatty acids there. You see that one?
I see it.
Yeah, you like that? Use that for brain health. I've always taken that. Which is a question I'll ask you after. Just remember this thought. You have everything you've done in your career, high stress, I'm assuming, is part of your profession. How do you stay healthy? Because you look vibrant, you're clear of mind. But let's get this over with first. Here we go. Stand by. We're revealing today live on the Quiet Warrior Show a 5-star international review for the book. Read this before the book Failure to Treat. That's Peter Kowey's book. And so I've titled it, Read This Before Your Next Hospital Visit. So here we go. It's posted and live. You can see it. A business associate passed this book along to me, and within the first pages, I knew I was holding something rare. Dr. Peter Kowey has spent 5 decades at the bedside of heart patients, trained at Harvard under Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dr. Bernard Lown, and has finally decided to say out loud what most of his colleagues will only whisper. Failure to Treat uses 20 unforgettable patient stories to pull the curtain back on a healthcare system that has quietly traded healing for revenue. You meet Mrs. Francis, whose aortic aneurysm gets lost inside a copy and paste electronic record. You meet Jay, who walks into a discount screening event and walks out with a disabling stroke. And you meet parents racing past a shuttered emergency room while their infant son fights for air in the back seat. Each story lands because it's built from real cases Dr. Kowey lived through with his own patients. And what makes his book different is its refusal to play politics. Dr. Kowey names administrators, insurers, private equity firms, pharmacy middlemen who have hollowed out medicine, and he's just an honest about the blind spots inside his own profession. I read it cover to cover. It will be a book I point to for years because nobody should walk into their next medical appointment without understanding how the game is now played. If you or someone you love will ever be a patient, and that means a lot of us, this is not optional reading. It's a survival guide written by a doctor who still believes the profession can be saved. So buy it, read it, hand it to someone that you care about. Congratulations, Dr. Kowey.
Thank you, Tom. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, so repurpose that. I'll send you what's on Amazon. Your team can cut it, put it on your website. Tell us how you've stayed healthy just as a cardiologist who understands the heart and the systems. Well,
it's all about staying active and exercising, and keeping and moving. I always told my patients, every single patient I ever saw, that there's never been a study that's ever been done in which exercise hasn't improved something. Cancer patients do well when they exercise. Stroke patients do well when they exercise. I'm sure you exercised and during your rehabilitation. Staying active is obviously very important. And I mean, all the other stuff, controlling your weight and making sure your blood pressure is good and all that, very important. But I think of all the things that I can, the one thing that I can really encourage people to do that really has a lasting effect is to stay active and exercise.
Well, there you have it, everybody. That segment is worth listening to. We'll probably make a viral clip. Stay active, keep moving. Peter, now that we're friends and we're forever connected, I hope if you come to Vancouver, I live in a place called Port Moody, not far from downtown, and we have what's called Burrard Inlet. And I literally walk out of my house and I walk the trails, and it's around the inlet. And you can get in a boat and sail to Asia through that inlet. But that's how I stay active. And my wife, who gets up every morning, is in the gym at 6 before she goes to the bank job she has. So we both buy into that. So thank you for that. Going to throw another question out at you. We're not in Plato's anymore, but this is a segment called The Unwritten Chapter, just to have some fun with you. So Dr. Lown is still your North Star. If he were sitting in that empty chair today and could give you one piece of counsel for the fight ahead, what do you think he would say to you?
Dr. Lown had a term that he used called technocrat. And what he meant by that is that physicians, the thing that physicians have done, the thing that they have done that has probably been the most harmful is that they've been seduced by technology. And so we've created medicine. You said this earlier, Tom, and I completely agree. Medicine has advanced tremendously. I mean, we are, as I said, we're doing things now that we never could have done several years ago when I started in practice. And that's all to the good. The problem is that we created a gap between all those things that we can do for people and ability of people to access it. And what Dr. Lown preached, and I completely agree and have also admonished people about, is that we need to close this gap. When we develop new things, we need to keep in mind as we're developing them, how can we get this out to people who really need it? And how can we impact diseases that are so common in our community, like stroke and heart attack and cancer, so that these advances are meaningful to people and it changes their lives. That's the challenge. And whatever we can do to close that gap by discussing things as we're doing today would be very welcome.
I know. Thank you for that. I go back to something I used to say to my wife, or we say to each other, take back your own health. And read, learn, listen to you, read your book, but do some things differently yourself. Don't wait for the doctor. Hey, everybody, great advice from Dr. Kowey. The last question we're going to ask you, and then we'll give you an award today. Did you know you're getting an award?
No, I didn't know that.
It's like Christmas today. A little known fact about Peter, he told me this offline, he's had 6 Portuguese water dogs. This is a man of habit. Most people get different kinds of dogs. He's had 6. Now, I can't tell you if he murdered them all for his mystery novels, but failure to give treats is probably not a problem in his life. Hey, this is called the Warrior's Torch, and we asked our last guest, and her name is Sharon Spano. She's an American, and she's quite well known in her profession, to pose a question for you. And so here's the question. If you could tap into your greatest superpower, what would you change about the world, and will that work?
I would like to for people to treat other people with more respect. I think one of the problems that we are now getting into, and this is not becoming political, but I think it's across the board, is that there's an increasing lack of respect for our fellow man. And I'd like to see us return to some kind of civility in that regard, that we really reach out and understand that people are really going through tough times. They need help. And that this constant derision of other people, the constant complaining and moaning and making fun of people really has to end. So if I could change anything, I would change people's attitudes about their fellow man. And that translates, by the way, into being a good doctor. Being a good doctor is also, the first part of that is being a good person. You can teach a lot of people the science, but you can't teach them how to be a human being.
Yeah, no, that's, I call that character, right? And I'm not a religious person, but I believe in my faith, and I read the Bible. My concussion had me really praying a lot, and the one thing the Bible teaches me is how to love people, how to forgive, how to be good, and the word respect, right? What's interesting is in my own work, in my doctorate, my thesis was titled The Quiet Revelation, Unfolding Identity in a Complex World. And one of the things I really dug into was also psychology, and how can we have this relational dialogue, you and I, if we're not hearing each other and seeing each other? Because I really believe, Peter, that what lies in the quiet space between us, that's where new knowledge is created. If I don't listen to you and hear you and create safety and respect for you, you're not going to talk to me. And so you're absolutely right. And way to go on that thought. So why don't you give us a question to ask the next guest? I can't tell you who it is. Make it universal, something interesting at the end. What do you think? I'll just write it down here.
I would like to know from the next person, if you could change anything about the medical care system in the United States, what would it be? What would you change?
Okay, I'm just writing on my paper here. So if you could change, you could change
anything in the medical care system in the United States.
Medical care system in the USA, what would it be?
Right.
Well, that's interesting because tomorrow is the next. I usually don't do 2 interviews in a week, but we had to move one for scheduling. And she is a very accomplished person. You'll see the interview, and she is in the United States. So it's going to be very relevant to ask her that. So let me just move that off the screen. And now we're going to give you an award, and we'll get offline your address so we can figure out how to get this to you. I hate to tell you, Peter, but I sent one of these out to another guest, and it got through Canada into U.S. Postal, and the guy got my envelope, my guest, and he said somebody stole the award out of it.
Oh, no.
So hopefully we'll find a better way to make sure that doesn't happen. So have you heard of challenge coins?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So for the sake of the audience, I do this each time because not everybody knows. So I'm going to add that back. So you can see this little card comes with it. So the history of the challenge coins, they started in World War I era. Peter, the practice of carrying coin designed specifically for a unit was popular with the armed special forces. And carrying the coin at all times and presenting it when challenged to prove affiliation with that unit, resulting in a number of consequences for those who couldn't produce theirs. A most popular required the coinless soldier to buy a round of drinks. And apparently that practice continues to be popular today. And my father was in the British Army. He was born in Fiji, and they enlisted him, came in, was in the Canadian Forces. He was a commanding officer. And then he became a drunk and went into AA. So he had an AA coin. These coins are around the world in different areas. So I had these hand-painted and crafted when I started the show. I didn't know how it would go.
Wow.
And they're made
That's
in
really
your
cool.
country.
Yeah.
And thank you. So you got the image of the show, but on the back is Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey narrative.
Wow.
The journey you've taken, which is finding the pain and the warts in something and coming back as a teacher.
Very nice.
So
Very nice.
congratulations and welcome to the Quiet Warrior community.
Thank you, Tom. It was a real pleasure spending time with you.
Yeah, let me take that off screen. For my job for life is to amplify your voice, and but we are friends now. So, Peter, on that note, anything last you want to say to the audience that you haven't said, and where they can get a hold of your book and stuff?
Well, the website's peterkoweyauthor.com, so
Okay.
that's easy. I did this whole thing not to sell books. That's not my goal. My goal was to use the book to educate, because I think that if we can get people to understand what the issues are, it's going to be a whole lot easier to make them better, to change them. But the first step is understanding and education. And so I'm really grateful for what you're doing, because you have amplified that message, and I think it's going to do a lot of good.
Okay, what a great message, education, and we're going to amplify that for sure. This will be part of your legacy. So everybody, find your true passion, like you definitely hear from Peter, and purpose, and live the life you deserve and desire. We'll see you all next week on the Quiet Warrior Show. And thanks again, Peter, for being here. We'll have you back.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Okay, stand by, Peter. We're just still online here. Take this off.